Okay, so your parents are getting older and it's time to start thinking about what comes next. This is a super emotional conversation and you have to approach it very carefully. I recommend bite-sized pieces. Open that door and then let it be. Make sure that you get their input. So I want to talk about some of the options here and kind of give you maybe some tips for when you're thinking about having this conversation. The way that I see it, there are two sets of options, and they depend on whether family caregivers are available or family caregiving is not available. So if a family caregiver is not available, then you kind of have two choices. First, you can adjust their house so that it suits their needs as they get older, and this generally includes one-story living with accessible facilities like bathrooms and showers, and then you can hire help as needed, and from the lightest help up to full-time help. There's a lot of great services out there. The second option is that they can move to an adult community where, as their needs progress, they can get the attention that they need. That's if family caregiving is not available. Now, if family caregivers are available, then you have a couple good options as well. First, you can move them closer to the family caregivers. I see this happen pretty often, and that way it ensures that someone who cares for them is there to help them with their needs. The other option is you can consider creating an in-law suite either in their existing property or in your existing property. And then finally, an option that I have seen families do is they will sell both properties and then they'll consolidate their households into a larger house that either has an in-law suite already existing or that can have some renovation done to accommodate that kind of separate space for both families. My family has caregivers available, whether my parents want them or not. So I'm going to tell you our story. Before we even started this conversation with them, they had already gone the route of adjusting their house. It's basically a ranch with a full walkout basement that when we were growing up, there were 6 people in my family and it fit all of us. But they could basically just live on one floor. They had renovated the master shower and bath so that it was wheelchair accessible. They had widened the doors. And aside from moving the laundry upstairs, they were ready to go. However, this house has a lot of land, which includes mowing. We live where it snows, so there's shoveling and plowing that has to be done. The boiler and the HVAC system were well past the end of their useful life, although still working, but that deferred maintenance was going to become an issue. And, you know, these things would become more work in the future. But even with all of that stuff, moving to an adult community was not an option they wanted to consider. They have friends that did it and they love it, but just for them, it wasn't the way to go. So my husband and I were considering moving from Florida to Pennsylvania, and we really wanted to focus on the long term. And so we brought up the idea to them of, you know, what do you want to do? Is there a potential that we could build an in-law cottage on the property, because we have quite a few acres, and then we would take over the main house and they would live in the cottage, which they slowly became open to this idea, and it was really great. But when we approached the township, they said that wasn't an option. So then we talked about, okay, well, we'll take the second option. Instead of them moving closer to their caregivers, we would move close to them. We sent letters to all the neighbors and asked if they were willing to consider selling their house to us. And while we were having these discussions with my parents, someone brought up the idea of, well, why don't we just build on an in-law addition to the house? So then we started looking into that, and it was super, super expensive, not something that we could afford at that point. So then we came up with this idea of converting the lower half of the house into basically an in-law apartment for my parents. My mom got to design it. She did a phenomenal job. Check out the little movie and see all the great finishing touches she put on there, and they love it. But back to this being a delicate conversation, all told, this conversation, from when the conversation started to when they made the decision that yes, they wanted to move ahead with an in-law apartment, was 1.5 years. And then the construction took 6 months, and we've been living in this setup for 2 years. It's great. It's really wonderful. It's a unique situation for us, but hopefully by talking through some of these options, I will have helped you start thinking about how to have this conversation. And now I'll let my mother tell you a little bit about how this went from her perspective. Hopefully it lines up.
I would say you should ask your parents, how have you thought about what's going to happen going on with you and Dad? How is it? Do you have any problems taking care of the property? It would be important for the children just to say, have you thought about this? And if they get a strong negative, then maybe back off for a while, or just say, well, we were thinking about whatever your plan is, and we wondered if that would be something that you would be interested in, and give the parents, if they've had a strong reaction against the question, time to just think about it, putting it in a question form so they don't feel threatened. And if you are thinking about buying the parents' house and creating a space for the parents to live, then you really need to make sure you are strong on that. We would like to have you, we'd love to buy the house. We'd love to have you here, so the parents don't think that there's some kind of a plot to put them in a home or something like that, because you hear all kinds of stories as an older adult of situations that don't work out.
Yeah.
The setup works for me because I didn't want to leave this property that we live on, and we've lived here for 46 years and built the house ourselves, and it was something special to us that we didn't want to leave. Also, we have our children living with us, and this works out for both of us because there's someone here. It's a real joy to watch the children playing outside. It takes me back to when our children were little. It's nice just knowing that someone's there if there should be an emergency. We have a rather large land area around the house, and it was getting to be too much for my husband. He didn't want to deal with it anymore. And for young people, that just isn't a problem. They really love the land. They love taking care of it. And my daughter was looking to move back into this area, and just at the time that we were thinking, well, we have to think about our future. And it worked out for us. We said, well, would you consider buying this?
And we did. And the rest is history. Thanks so much for sticking around. And I know this was a little bit of a long segment, but hopefully you got something useful out of it. Have a great day.